Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations. And today we are talking about sales. Inevitably, when you talk about sales, we'll get onto the topic of mindset as well. However, I'm joined by a fantastic guest to guide us along that journey, Mr. Matt Sykes. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Colin, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, as all good podcasts start, we'll butter up your ego a little bit and give the listeners a bit of a flavour of who you are. So I was connected with you through previous guests in the podcast, Chris Reeve, and I started following your stuff on LinkedIn. I fell down the rabbit hole of your own podcast, and it's been a great connection to make, and I'm excited to share it with my audience. So tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Matt.
Yeah, so 20 odd years in the sales industry, the last 6 of those, Colin, working for myself. But if I go to the start, really most of my sales career has been in the B2B corporate sales space, working for organizations. Most of that time was spent in the packaging industry. Okay. Really glamorous, selling paint tins. I love the world of sales. I'm a learner. I learn every day. I don't think you can ever stop learning. So I'm constantly trying to improve. I have a real passion for the subject matter. I'm on a real mission, Colin, to try and change the sort of psychology and the attitude that we sometimes have towards the sales industry. Yeah. Because it does have a bit of a stigma attached, as I'm sure you can agree. So I'm on a bit of a mission to try and change that. And I think there are various ways that we can do that. We might get into one or two of those things. But yeah, love everything that I do. 2014 was a big year for me. I decided to make myself redundant. I think that's a gift that only you should have. So yep. I sacked my company and I left and started working for myself. I didn't quite have the cojones really to run my own business from day one. So I bought a franchise, which specialized in performance psychology, mindset and attitude. And I loved working in that industry. I learned a lot about people like Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and all the usual suspects, but learned so much more about myself. And then about 2 or 3 years into that, I thought, well, you know, the whole concept of performance psychology and personal development is so akin to the industry that I came from. So many salespeople, I think, could really improve their results, their performance, their behavior, their life, if they're just able to tap a little bit more into the sort of the mindset game. So I decided to take a little bit of the knowledge that I'd learned from personal psychology, brought it into the world of selling and set a business up called Sales Cadence, which is what I run today. And really, I'm out there helping people solve problems because most organizations that I work with, Colin, tend to have, you know, a couple of really big problems. You know, really simplistically, deals take too long to convert, and not every deal converts to it from a lead into a sale. So I go into organizations and I help them solve those two things.
Yeah. So you've got that credibility from 20 plus years in the industry, walking the walk and talking the talk, and now you help organizations improve how they convert deals and the value of those and the speed of those. And ultimately, I think the way we'll probably go with this episode, Matt, is that I think everyone in some element, in some way, is selling at some point within their lifestyle in terms of whatever career they're in or whatever industry they're in. And I've heard you say it before as well, everybody is in sales. And that might sound maybe controversial because, as you said, sometimes people have an instant reaction to the word sales to think, oh, I don't work in sales. I'm not a salesperson. But I wonder your thoughts on that.
Well, it's really interesting, Colin, because on my podcast, the very first question I ask all of my guests is that question, which is, what were you doing when you made your very first sale? It's the same. We'll talk a bit about the book in a second, but it's the very first line in the book. When I get to the opportunity to speak on stages, it's the very first line I say to the audience. And actually, when I'm on a stage and I say, okay, hands up all those people who are in sales, of course, no one really puts their hand up. Occasionally you get 1 or 2 brave souls. But the reality is everybody's hand should go up. Because if you're listening to this podcast right now and I was to say to you, can you think of one example in the last 24 hours where you've had to get somebody to do something for you? You've had to use the skill of influence. Then you're a salesperson. Because we have to negotiate our way around life, asking people for favors, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a meeting this afternoon with 2 guys and I needed to have that meeting between 3 and 4. And I had to influence them in such a way that they were willing to do that. And there are examples all over the place. And if you're willing to just accept the fact that it's not really selling at all, it's helping. And I think most people in life are happy to help people. then you're halfway there. But, let's look at some really brief examples. School kids will be trying to sell their parents on not doing the homework or tidy their room.
Yep.
And actually, kids are the greatest salespeople ever because they never know when to stop. The parents are trying to sell the employer, the company that they work for, on perhaps a promotion or a pay rise. The employer is trying to then sell back to the employee about the vision, mission, values of their business, and the success that person will have on, getting their team of employees involved and engaged in the vision, mission, values will have a massive impact on the performance of that business. So when you look at it like that, there's very little. There's very little evidence out there that suggests that we aren't all trying to sell something.
Yeah, I really like the way you frame that, because straight away we're talking about helping people rather than maybe the initial gut reaction that some people have when you talk about sales, which is, a greasy secondhand car salesman that's trying to sell you something that won't work for as much money so he can get the most commission. And it's that unethical image of sales, which maybe puts people off from understanding that it's a very, very important skill. Now, many of the listeners that listen will be like me. They'll work in a full-time role alongside being passionate about fitness. But equally, there'll be lots of listeners that are personal trainers, online coaches, that it's one of the most sales-driven industries there is when it comes to converting people to pay their money for you to set up their fitness plan. And sometimes you speak to them and you wonder whether they understand that they're running a business that requires customers to come in and pay money the same as any other industry or retail.
100% agree. And that's a really great example, because if you think about the churn rate in the PT industry, okay, you find a client. I have a PT myself, I see him once a week. I have done since December of last year, because I'm on this sort of commitment. I'm 52 years old. I'm on this commitment to try and get myself in the best shape of my life. I've never really got myself there yet, Colin, and I'm slightly more older and wiser. And I mean that as a slant on me, not on anybody who's listening, because I never really had the wisdom and the accountability or desire to want to actually get myself in shape. But I do now. But if you think about that industry, it's predicated on the fact that you've got to sell somebody the idea of why it's worth their while to invest in you. So there's a bit of upfront selling required there. And what we tend to do in the world of sales is we don't really sell stuff, we sell outcomes.
Yeah.
And what PTs are doing is they're selling a better version of you in 12, 16, 24 weeks. And then, of course, you are relying on the client then to stick with the program, and you've got to make it engaging. You've got to show them evidence. That's a word we'll use quite a lot on this podcast, I guess, is evidence. You've got to show them the evidence that they're improving. And if we take that out of the PT world and you bring it into my world, when I work with my clients who are predominantly sales directors or CEOs, who've got I'm trying to help them de-risk their sales strategy. I have to show them the evidence that they can get there. I have to show them a better future. Invest in me and you'll get 10 times back, kind of thing. But once we're off and running, I better flipping well deliver it. And there better be some key performance indicators along the way that shows them they're making progress. Because if we can get them there, if I start to lose weight or I start to put muscle tone on, or I can bench press another 20 kilos, I'm hooked now because I can see the thing. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. And the PT world is a perfect example of where you've really got to be good at helping people.
Yeah, that whole helping people piece is where you've hit on again. And there was a lot within what you've said there, but one of the key things that we'll touch on is outcomes. And a lot of the time, and I've worked in sales for 6 years now, a lot more junior than yourself, Matt, but so often you see people, even people that you would consider to be reasonable salespeople, maybe not the top, but they just spew out benefits and features of a product. And they never get into what it will actually look like when you use this. Rather, they just say, oh, it comes with 24-hour helpline, rather than, oh, it comes with a 24-hour helpline, which means that you are never without support at your moment of need. Whatever product you're selling, we won't be too specific. But can you maybe tell us a little bit around how you try to include evidence and outcomes throughout your conversations, so that it's not something that ends up at the end of a pitch, so to speak, which I know will be a common challenge for salespeople?
I mean, I'll give you a really quick example from my earlier years of getting involved in the industry. Long before I joined the corporate world, which is 20 odd years ago. When I was 16, I left school, and at that time, this is going back into the mid 80s, there was never really a sort of a desire for people to want to do further education, do a degree, not like there is today. And in fact, the Prime Minister at the time was a lady called Margaret Thatcher, and she was very much into get out there and earn some money and buy a house. And so the first job I had was working in the shoe shop. And I turned up for work on the first day, Colin, and the store manager basically said, look, you're not here to sell shoes, which really confused me because I'm looking around the store and there's like shoes everywhere. And I said, I don't understand. He said, well, if you think about it, Matt, everybody's made their mind up to buy when they come in the store anyway. They're not in here looking for kettles or tea bags. They're here to buy a pair of shoes. So the emotional sale, and we might talk about that in a second, Colin, the emotional sale's already done. Of course, you've got to help them buy. But I wanted to sell them something they don't yet know they need. I wanted to sell them shoe trees. And shoe trees are those things you put in your shoes when you're not wearing them to keep them in great shape. Yeah. So my point is this. I spent that first week, Colin, at 16 years old, asking people close questions. Do you want to buy a pair of shoe trees? Have you got a pair of shoe trees? Would you like a pair of shoe trees? Are you interested in buying a pair of shoe trees? I must have asked 250 people in that first week. And of course, everybody said no. And it was the most demoralizing thing ever. And so if you want to talk about evidence, there's some evidence that shows me that something's not working right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out I managed to sell a pair at the end of the week. But when the store manager came down to me on the Friday afternoon, late in the afternoon, I thought, I'm going to get sacked here. My first week, first job, I'm going to get sacked. He actually smiled and he was really quite complimentary. And he basically said, look, you've uncovered the jewel, the gem that most people in sales never uncover, which is the thing that people buy for their reasons, not yours. And the minute I understood that, and it took me a while, actually people only buy stuff that's important and it's beneficial to them, right? Yeah. Back to outcomes again. And if that is the case, and if you think about your own situation and the listeners as well, you know, whenever you go and buy something, it's for your reasons, not anybody else's. Because otherwise people would phone you up from the car dealership and say, hey, Colin, I've got a nice 5 Series BMW, pop down now and buy it, please. Yeah. You're going to say no to that. People buy for their reasons, not yours. And really, the minute you're happy to accept that, then the whole narrative and the way that you engage with prospects and customers, clients, has to be on their terms and not yours. And I think that's a really important point to make in terms of, you know, why on earth would anyone then turn up and start pitching their business? You know, who in their right mind would ever start a conversation? Let me tell you all about us. We've been in business for 56 years. We've got 5 different factories across 14 different, you know, no one cares. So for me, it's really, really important to recognize that selling is about the other person. It's not something you do to people. It's something that you do for people and with people, and you take them on the journey. And you know, so much of what I teach with my clients, Colin, is all about sort of full disclosure. Quite often I will say to a client at the start of the conversation, something along the lines of, look, absolutely no idea if I can help you. I'd love to try and find out. It'd be great to ask you some questions to see if we can do something together. But let's just pretend that we did find something in common and that you were interested in going ahead. Let me show you the steps or the sequence that we would go through so that you can see in advance of what's going to happen. And I think that approach where we're being honest with people, we're showing them that there is no sleight of hand. I think that what that does is it lowers their anxiety level and it starts to build that thing that we know is super important, which is trust.
Yeah, so you're building trust from the very start by being open and honest. And like you say, there is maybe that anxiousness in a pitch meeting, because it's called a pitch meeting, from the buyer's side, because they feel, oh, are they going to try and hoodwink me, or what is this dynamic that we've built up here? So you're reassuring them that it might not be the right fit. However, if we do decide to proceed, this is what it's going to look like. And these are the steps that we're going to take. So you put out that roadmap for them. And people are always more assured when they know where they're going. I'm more assured when I'm driving in the car, when I've got my Google Maps, because I know where I'm heading. I don't need to think about the different junctions that I need to take because it's going to tell me how. And as a salesperson, you are there as that guide for them to take them towards the solution, which, depending on how they answer these questions, it may or may not be the solution for them. And we all know in an ethical world, you walk away if the fit isn't right. And you'll have done that many times with different businesses recently. Absolutely. Don't want to waste their time. As important, I don't want to waste mine. You know, and again, I'm guilty of this in my corporate life, Colin, in the past, of hanging around in deals that I should never have been involved with in the first place. And there's a reason that happens, because, you know, with the greatest respect to the great sales nation out there, very few of them are trained. And I can say that confidently because I train people for a living, right? And I also know after 16 years in corporate, I was only ever really trained in one thing, and that was negotiation.
And why on earth would you be trained in negotiation? Because the price always goes down. But hey ho, there you go. And so yeah, it's really important, I think, that we recognize the fact that helping people is so important. Recognizing that people buy for their reasons, not ours. Being honest and open from the start. All of that stuff is about as far away as you can get from selling. But trust me, that is the way to help people buy stuff.
These are excellent foundations to hit on. And I guess one of the most frequently asked questions, and when I spoke to some of my friends that work in sales like me, they were keen to hear what you had to say when it came to understanding what are the most common bad habits that you see when you go in to train individuals within an organization, within a sales team.
Most organizations, when they call me in, I always ask them the question, have you got a sales problem or a prospecting problem?
Okay.
Because the two are completely different. Okay, they're married, for sure, but prospecting is a different skill to selling. Prospecting is the ability to pan through, literally using the gold analogy, pan through the driftwood until you find those one or two little nuggets that look like the sort of client that you think you might be able to help. So important as well when you're doing the prospecting thing to know who your ideal customer profile is. But have you got a prospecting problem or have you got a sales problem? Quite often they have both, but what we really start to uncover is they don't have enough leads. So my number one sort of observation would be in terms of mistakes is people don't prospect enough.
Yeah.
And the challenge with not prospecting enough is they become needy. Because they haven't got enough in their pipeline, they rely too much on the deal that's in front of them. And there is a whole, cacophony of things that happen as a result of that. We go into, when we're needy, Colin, we go into an environment with a client or a prospect or a buyer, and we might not realize it, but actually we look and we sound and we behave in a completely different fashion than we would do as if we'd rocked up in there thinking to myself, I'm going to give you 15 minutes, friend. I'm so busy. I've got so many deals on. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And if you don't like my fire, I'm out of here. Yeah. If we could take that mindset in, be a little bit more respectful than that, we would get on a lot better, because what buyers really want in front of them, of course, is a solution to their problem, but they want to trust the person in front of them, and they want to be assured that the person in front of them is confident enough to help them solve their problem. So I think the first issue would probably be they don't do enough prospecting. And look, we've got to do an hour a day, depending on what you do for a living. But if you're in a sales role, I would be allocating an hour a day to prospecting. And if I think about, our friend Chris Reeve and the circles that he works in with his social media business, I think about the brand that you're creating for yourself. So much of our prospecting can be predicated across a number of different mediums.
Yeah.
One of them can be through social. One will be the phone. We might talk about that later. Email still has a place, although it has its challenges. I do quite a lot of stuff with lumpy mail. I send a lot of postcards to people because I know they get opened.
Yeah.
So prospecting is the first one. Another one, there's so many. Another one would be, I see a lot of evidence of salespeople who send quotations and proposals too early.
Yeah.
And actually what you're doing when you send a quotation or a proposal too early is you're sort of formally documenting your stupidity. Because again, if I go back to my life in corporate times, Colin, I would send a lot of quotations that I never got any feedback from.
Yeah, that's the worst as well, because you've just, and excuse my French, you've just thrown enough shit at the wall and hope some of it stuck, because by that point, you've probably not understood their needs enough to put a proposal out there. And I know myself, completely same problem as yourself when you were worked in corporate at times, because my pipeline wasn't big enough. If I got even close to offering a deal, I was like, I'll just offer them the deal because they might take it. But it was a waste of time, because I spent all my time then chasing the no and almost sometimes never getting the feedback. And it was this perpetual cycle of they're in the funnel, or whatever metric your company uses to track your progress, but they're in the funnel, they're in review, they're in the final stages, they're a yes or a no, and sometimes they just drop out of that funnel without giving you the objection. And
well, quite a lot of the times what do we know for a fact, Colin? We know for a fact that people lie to salespeople, because we've all lied to salespeople. Do you want any help with that? No thanks, I'm just looking. I'm not just looking, I want to buy a suit, but I just don't want them in my face. Yeah. So we know that we lie to salespeople. We're all guilty of that. And actually, sometimes a prospect or a client will lie to you and ask you for a proposal just to get you out of their face. They perhaps haven't got the strength of fortitude of character to say, actually, it's a wrong fit. So I'll just send me a quotation proposal. You'll send it in, and you'll never hear from me again, and you'll be good because you won't follow up, because most salespeople don't follow up. So that's the first thing. But the second thing to remember with quotations and proposals, this is a really important point, is actually there are very few things that the buyer can't work out on their own without you anyway. I mean, there's a ton of information out there would suggest somewhere between 50 to 60% of the sale is done behind the laptop before you even need to engage with an organization, let alone a salesperson. So they can find out quite a lot of stuff about us. The one thing they normally can't find out is our price.
Yeah.
And actually, that's really important, valuable information for them. And yet we're willing to give that away for free, called a quotation. And if you think about the insanity of that, why on earth would you give anything away for free? Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that you should charge for a quote or a proposal, but actually do get something in return. And my advice to anybody I work with is, there are two pieces of advice for proposals. Number one is always send it at the end, because a quotation really is a confirmation of that we've agreed to do some business together. So I want to get a verbal yes first. And the second thing to remember is, if you do send one, follow up. So I'm going to send you this proposal tomorrow at 4:00, Colin. Can we jump on a call at 5? I want to get that level of assurance that you are willing to commit that time, because without it, it starts to sound a little bit flaky.
I'm glad you said commit there, because it's about commitment. And I know from previous roles, when I've asked for example, before I put forward a price, you like the concept, you like the idea, or more open questions than that. If I can get it to the ballpark of X or Y, and I put that in writing, how would you feel about that? Okay, great. Then we can do that. And then, like you say, get commitment to review it officially with them after you've sent it. And I think, like you say, booking in that next action gives you the follow-up that you need, rather than sending it into the internet, into the wide open space.
The place where deals go to die is what we call it. Yeah. They just go, yeah, and you get then all you get is a lifetime membership to a buyer's voicemail, and that's a really lonely place, and it goes on forever, and you never win. So, yeah. But I would also say as well, though, Colin, and again, I'm mindful of the fact that you gave an example, not probably a real life, but so if we're in the right ballpark, I'm going to send over a proposal, which would really be an indication that you're going ahead. Is that correct? Is another way that you could reframe that question?
Yeah, I like that.
So again, but you've got to be confident that they want to buy, and so really, that's a nice way to go on to the third one. The third mistake I see is that people don't have a sales process. They kind of think they know how people buy from them, but actually they don't know. And if we stop somebody in the street and said, "You're in sales, tell me what your sales process is," they'd probably struggle. They'd probably make up something that feels the way it goes, but they'd probably struggle. And not having a sales process is a mistake. Why? A number of reasons. Firstly, you send quotations at the wrong end, which is the front. And everybody sends quotations if they've got a sales process at the back, because as I've said, it's a confirmation that you've agreed to buy. And for that to have happened, there must have been a shed load of work going on and conversation going on between you and I before we get to that point. Yeah. The second thing about a process is it allows you to see where you go wrong. I've been doing sales for 20 odd years. I still make mistakes. I'm happy to accept that. But at least I know where I made the mistake, so it can't go wrong again next time. And having a process allows you to go back into that sort of map and say, "Oh, it happened there. They just objected about my price. I clearly haven't demonstrated enough value before I raised my price, because if I had, they wouldn't complain about the price." And so not having a process throws up a whole load of horror stories, and that would be the third mistake for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like you say, when you have that process there, you can identify at what stage in that process things went wrong. And it could be that your approach at that particular point, like you say, building value before price presentation, or it could be that you didn't get enough commitment before you presented price, anything like that, you can identify and go back and say, well, how did I deliver that? What questions did I ask? Did I actually filter this buyer correctly? And it was somebody that was going to be able to purchase this. Did I speak to the right person? Was I actually speaking to the ultimate decision maker, or was I being led along by the finance controller when I'm speaking to the finance director? All sorts of different considerations within that process.
Yeah, use that point exactly. So there's a part of the training that I deliver, and in the book that we've just released, where we talk about the importance of resource. Okay, so one of the steps of the sales process is resource. And what resource essentially is saying, okay, we've got to this point where I've worked out that you've got a problem. We've asked each other a few questions. I've done most of the listening, but we've basically come to the conclusion that actually you do have a problem and I can help you solve it. And actually you're now indicating to me that you want me to do that. most salespeople will then take that as a buying signal to go and pitch and send the proposal, and it's the wrong time to do it, because the next thing that we've got to find out is, have they got the resources to buy from me? And one of the most important resources that I must get from them is knowing who else is behind them, because there's always more than one person involved in the decision-making process. You may well be the person that the organization has put up to front the deal, but I know from experience that there'll be 2 or 3 people behind you, behind the scenes, that are going to help you. The FD could be one of them. Head of logistics could be another. If it's got something to do with people and training, there could be some HR involvement. The danger is, if I isolate you by saying, come on, who else is involved in this then? That's going to put your nose out of joint. So I need to find a more subtle way of getting these people involved. And, you know, the sorts of questions we say, look, there's going to be a team of people around helping you get this deal across the line. So just out of curiosity, who are they? If I'm smart enough, Colin, I'd have done my homework on LinkedIn first to try and map them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I haven't got a process, if I'm not able to realize that there is a certain steps that we must go in, if I don't get that resource commitment, then we're going to get to the end of the conversation and you're going to say to me, Matt, love the proposal. Unfortunately, Rod, Jane and Freddie didn't.
And you say, who's that? And because, and equally, if you've identified them earlier, so if you say, for example, similar question to yourself, you've outlined what the process looks like at your end in terms of, if you like what we have to say in future, the steps will be this. If you do like what we say, what does the process look like at your end? What's the sign-off process like? And then if they drop in that, the chairman, we're a family-run business, the chairman likes to have final sign-off on all fiscal decisions. And you say, okay, fantastic. When we present the presentation, is the chairman available? Or does he want to jump on a call and ask any questions, and I can review them with him over, and making him feel important as well? Because like you say, it could be that you've been speaking to this contact who wants to feel important and needs the presentation, but then there's also somebody above them that signs off that might want to be involved as well, and might equally think, oh, why have they not asked about me? Or why have they not tried to engage me in this process as well? Because I'm the one with the pen or the stamp.
Yeah. And again, you know, back to, if I've got a process and I know the steps, I might even have shown it to the prospect up front, full disclosure. But if I know the process and I'm confident and I know where I am and what's going to come next, that confidence allows me to be a little bit more, should we say, challenging. And I mean that in a challenging, positive way, not challenging in a negative way. Because on occasion, sometimes when you say, you know, other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process? And they push back, oh, just me then. I always know there's more than one person. So I might push back and say, so what, the CEO can't overrule you then? Yeah. You know, and you've got to be confident in your own ability and have earned the right and built the trust and reduced the anxiety before you can make a bold statement like that.
Ask a question.
We both know that the CEO can overrule you. And I'm just going to give you a little nudge to let you know we're equals in this conversation. If you really want to solve your problem, if you really want to get the outcome that your organization has put you in front of me to get, help me get you there. Don't put blocks in front of me.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we won't go down the rabbit hole, but that whole piece of salespeople being too differential within a meeting is terrible. So that whole clasping hands, thanks very much for your time today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Open the meeting instead with and this is how we're trained, open the meeting with an impact statement about what we believe we can deliver for your business, because we know X, Y, and Z about it from your financial accounts. Here's what we can deliver, for example. And then you can do the whole, appreciate the fact that you're all available. This is my role. This is my colleague's role. This is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And it's that starting on an equal footing is one of the big focuses that we have.
During lockdown, Colin, I got myself trained. I'm always learning, as I said, and I reached out to a really smart guy called Nick Rickson, and he took me through a really slick six-step sales process.
Okay.
And what you've just reminded me there is a quick point just to mention to you is when you open a meeting or a conversation, then really you close it at the start. And your point there is a really brilliantly well-made point. So you close it at the start by saying, look, Colin, great, we've got some time together this morning. My understanding of the reason why we're in the room is for me to show you how sales cadence, sales training can save you money and increase your revenue. And I'm expecting the person across the table to do what you're doing right now, which is smile and nod, because that's ultimately what you want me in the room to do. Save your time, increase your money. So I set the agenda at the start, called the close. It's now mine to lose, right?
Yeah, sorry, Matt, you've opened perfectly there. I really like that.
Yeah. So at that point now that we both know the reason why we're in the room, I'm going to ask you for your agenda, because people buy for their reasons, not mine. So I'm going to say, so Colin, specifically, what's not working for you in your sales process right now? Right? I'm going to ask that question. And what I'm going to get there is a list of all the specific problems you've got. And if I'm smart enough and I've been trained enough to know the importance of giving people a bit of space, and the salesman's silence isn't a tactic, it's a philosophy. We all need time to process and think. So give people that time. We're not playing the he who speaks next loses game, because that is a tactic. Yeah. But I'm going to let that person tell me what their specific problems are. And they might say, oh, well, we just don't close enough deals. And I'm going to go, close enough deals. Okay. What next? Oh, and we're also, I don't know, we seem to be doing a lot of negotiation. We've got a lot of competitors in the marketplace. Okay, competition. What next? And I'm going to keep pushing it back. And what's going to happen, Colin, is I'm going to get a list of maybe 5 or 6 specific things that they've got. What's the point of telling you this? The point of telling you this is, when I've got my list of 5 specific things, and I might ask them to give me a priority of what's the most important one, if we could only solve one.
Yeah.
I now know what I've got to pitch against. And again, we're not going to go back to the question you asked me earlier about mistakes, but too many salespeople try to kitchen sink it. When you think about it, I've only got to pitch against the specific problems that you've got. Yeah. People buy for their reasons. Okay. And let me help you solve those specific issues. So that's a really important one. So yeah, you jogged my memory just there.
Yeah. In terms of what you mentioned there, in terms of getting those 4 or 5 things, or understanding at the very start of your conversation what their actual pain points are, that's one of the most common mistakes that I've seen within industries that I've been in, and accounts that I've won from competitors that have maybe held something for a period of time and haven't been aware of their developing needs and requirements. And when you go in and actually understand that their biggest problem with respect to their insurance, which is the space that I work in, is X, Y, or Z, or they've expanded to Portugal and they have no idea about what different legislative policies they need to have in place there, and their current broker just slept on it and let it happen. Whereas because I've asked about what's worrying about you, or not, I hate that question, but like, what are you concerned at the moment with regards to your program? Like, what have you looked at? And if they come back and talk about that and they haven't discussed that with their current advisor, I've got that written down to say, this is how we address this right from the start. And that's how you move things forward. And equally, when you were speaking about a common problem with regards to prospecting, one of the ones I had in my mind was that procrastination piece that many of us in sales can be guilty of at times, when we sometimes lack confidence and lack direction or knowledge on what our message is. And the big focus in my team, in my organization, is having that really strong message that we believe from our research in that business that we will go to with. And we have maybe 2 or 3 that we rotate through depending on how the contact takes that. And don't get me wrong, you might get a brick wall, but you need to find out whether that message resonates, and then you switch to the next message and you hit them. It's the same way that you would open the meeting. That's what your message is over the phone, over your emails. And when I talk about procrastination, and I'm sure we'll get onto it with regards to the phone, it's very similar to that, not having enough leads coming into the top of the pipeline and making us needy. So it's quite so many things in sales go round in circles, don't they? They all impact each other. It's a domino effect, whatever you want to term it, that things go into each other based on lots of different problems within the process. So I guess when you go into a business, there must be, maybe if you fix 2 or 3 things, actually it turns out that you fixed maybe 8 or 9 things, because these other things all feed into each other.
Yeah, and quite often as well, Colin, people will come to you in your business and in mine thinking they know the problem, and actually they don't. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the insanity of someone coming to you, a specialist skill that you've developed over your career in an industry that you've studied hard in, that you live and breathe every day of the week, for someone to come into your business and tell you that they think they know what the solution to the problem is a kind of a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. People often in my industry use the analogy of the doctor. You wouldn't go and prescribe your own medicine. You go and see a doctor. The doctor asks you a load of questions until they get to the point where they're confident enough going, yeah, I've seen this before. What you need to do is take 3 of those 4 times a week. So it's a super important thing that, again, I can't tell you the importance of coming back to the process. That's a really important message for me, but you're right. There are a whole load of domino effects that go on. The thing I was going to say to you briefly was, people will often come to me, as I said earlier, about the 2 key stock things that they want. I want a be better at handling objections, and I want to close more deals. And the reality is you don't need either of them. If you know how to sell, you don't normally get an objection. And if you do, it's on you. And if you do it the right way, they normally close themselves.
Yeah.
And when you sit down with somebody who says, I want to invest in some objection and some closing training, and then you say, actually, I don't think you do, but let's try and work that out together and see for sure. And then they suddenly realize, my God, actually, we don't need it at all, do we? That's what selling's about. It's helping people solve a problem and almost do it in a granular way where you keep pushing them back. All of my contracts and proposals that I send to my clients include a clause that says, are you sure you need this training? Can you imagine the insanity of that? I've sold them. They've agreed to buy from me. And now I'm pushing back and saying, are you sure you need it? And obviously I do it for a reason, because A, I want them to be totally sure and consciously think about it before they sign. But B, I don't want to waste my time with people that aren't going to go to work and put my content into application, because domino effect again. If I can't help you solve your problem and get great results, you're not going to refer me. You're not going to give me an introduction. I won't get a case study. Actually, you might even slant me on Facebook. That's not happening.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just mention, when you talked about the doctor there and you going in with your symptoms, the first sales trainer I ever had in my job after university said that so many salespeople are like doctors. We go in and we make prescriptions without diagnosis because we haven't asked good enough questions. We've got a product and we just go bang, bang, bang and hit it against them to say, oh, well, it worked for this company. It worked for this company. But this company, we haven't actually explored what their needs are, because it might be different. Obviously, you can adjust and amend your product, but we need to understand what the benefits are of our product for that particular individual.
There's I was going to say, Colin, just briefly on that point, that training I got during lockdown, you'll have heard of the expression, people buy emotionally and then justify rationally afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And we've all got a wardrobe full of clothes where we've made the sale in and got him and thought, how on earth am I going to get into those horrendous shoes? But so we know that's true. We make the sale emotionally first and then we justify it rationally thereafter. Step one of that training, that 6-step process, was to agree agendas up front. Step 2 then is to become pre-sold. So when I've worked out what your specific problems are, I'm going to push back and say, so Colin, tell me what you know about sales cadence. Or you're going to say, tell me what you know about your organization. And what I'm looking for there is a positive response, which says, yeah, I've researched you online. I've listened to your podcast. Your website looks great. I did the scorecard, learned a lot. If you get that feedback from a prospect, you're kind of pre-sold. You've still got some work to do, but you're sort of pre-sold. If conversely, I say, Colin, tell me what you know about sales cadence. And you go, Matt, absolutely nothing. Now we've got a different conversation to have.
Yeah.
So it's not over by any stretch of the imagination, but I now need to work a little bit harder. But the point I'm trying to get to is, by asking someone's specific agenda point, and then by finding out if I'm pre-sold, I'm taking someone to a high state of emotional sell. They're happy. They're in front of someone who's going to help them solve their problem. They feel good about themselves. And badly trained salespeople see that behavior as buying signals. Okay. And that's the point. They say, well, let me tell you about how great we are. And let me show you how I can solve your problem. Here's my proposal, kind of thing. And what we talked about earlier is the fact that people need the time and the space to justify the thing rationally thereafter. So it's the wrong time to pitch when you get that feeling that they're on board with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. Not jumping the gun. And we've spoken about prospecting there, and one of the most common things that when I told some of my colleagues and friends that you were going to come on the podcast was talking about the different tools that we have now. And you spoke about email, you spoke about the phone, you spoke about social selling. You've even mentioned there about referrals and testimonials. There's regularly discussions on LinkedIn that the phone is dead. And I wonder what you think about that before we move on to some of the other aspects of prospecting.
It's still the best medium there is for getting an instant response. Okay, I accept the fact that quite a lot of calls will go to voicemail. But when did anybody decide it was good to get off the phone and move on to email? I must have missed that memo, Colin.
Yeah.
Because the phone is a much easier way of contacting people, you know? So that stigma is attached for a number of reasons. The first one is because no one likes to be cold called. And I don't think cold calling really is a thing. I think there's definitely warm calling.
Follow-up call. That's what we call it.
Call it.
We just changed the frame and we call it a follow-up call.
A follow-up call, perfect. So there absolutely has to be a reason to reach out for somebody. People buy for their reasons. So when I pick the phone up, I've got to have something of value for the other person. And again, the reason why it's sort of fallen out of fashion, and it should never have done so, is because people don't know how to use the phone correctly. Yeah, and they fear it. And we know what fear does. Fear stops us. It paralyzes us. It's got spiders all over the phone. Has it really, though? Let's go back to that word evidence we talked about earlier. Show me the evidence that says picking up that phone is going to be bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're confident to know that, okay, if I pick the phone up and I reach out to somebody who I've researched to be an ideal customer, that I know that the person I'm ringing will have either had the problem that I solve, might have the problem that I've solved, or will have it in the future, then all I'm really doing is picking up the phone and giving them some business advice.
Yeah.
Right. And ultimately, I'm trying to find out if they fit that sweet spot, which is someone who needs my help. And again, of course, you need the skill and the competence to be able to start the conversation going. And there's a number of ways in which you can do that. I don't know if you're connected with Benjamin Dennehy.
I'm not, no.
So he's a really experienced, he's a bit Marmite. He's
Okay.
quite a character, but he has a very simple pattern interrupt when he dials out on a cold call. First thing he says is, "Hi, Colin, this is a cold call. Do you want to hang up or give me 30 seconds?" And most people smile and laugh. And if he's ringing the right people, his sweet spot is CEOs. If he's ringing the CEO and he gives a message like that, 99 times out of 100, they go, depends what it's about. And he just bought himself the 10 seconds. And because he's confident and he knows his craft and he's very, very good at what he does, his next statement is, well, look, if you'll give me 30 seconds, I'll tell you. And they laugh again. And before you know it, he's bought himself half a minute to pitch. What does he pitch? He pitches their problem. Why? Because he knows that they've either got it, have had it, or they'll have it in the future. And that will create the engagement,
Yeah.
So, and that, whether you go that hardcore approach like Benjamin, or there's a guy I had on my podcast recently called Mark Akers, who's a cold call specialist. He simplifies it and just, one of the very first things he says to someone, he says, "Hi, Colin, it's Mark here. We've never spoken before." And immediately what he's saying to that person, to you, is don't worry. I mean you no harm. I'm being honest with you. We've never spoken before. And it's a subtle way of saying this is a cold call without saying it's a cold call.
Yeah, I really like that. Acknowledging the elephant in the room from the start. And I think, I don't know if it was Benjamin, but I've heard somebody similar on a podcast, and that's how he opens his calls. And maybe it was Benjamin. Is he the world's most hated sales trainer? Is that his branding? Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I knew him as rather than his actual name, unfortunately. But yeah, that's a really good way to open the call. And one of the things that I was thinking around was, and we can relate this back to fitness, but time under tension. So time under the barbell builds muscle. Reps build muscle. Time under tension using the phone and reps using the phone build your ability and your confidence within it. And I know the first year when I was told that I had an account base to look after, and I was told this next year, oh, we're actually going to move into another market and we're going to offer this product to another market. We have no market share in that market, so it's just going to be exclusively new business in that space. And I, terrified to pick up the phone, not sure what to say, was always very confident speaking on the phone to existing clients and customers because they already paid me money, and I thought, oh, that's fine, fantastic. But there was that anxiety and that fear. And the only thing that I can say is that after that year of just occasionally doing like kind of 45-minute blasts, and that was what the sales trainer that we had at that time spoke about, rather than doing a call, writing down the notes, putting into Salesforce, whatever you're using, and then going back on the phone again, you would just have your 10, 15 calls, however many you want to phone. Obviously have notes, whatever you want to have in front of you, and just bang through them all. And then at the end, then you go back to the Salesforce or whatever CRM and input what you went through. And by the end of that, just by doing a number of reps, I'm now much more confident on the phone and much more comfortable with the fact that you're going to get a no. More often than not, you're actually going to end up speaking to a gatekeeper and leaving a message. And that then gives me the chance to follow up with an email to the person. So I'm trying to phone you, Matt. I get your PA. I'll do the title of the email saying, left a message with Shirley or Susan or whoever it was, or Sam. And then you open it up and you say, oh, I did get a message from her, and I also, or my PA, and I've also got this email from this guy, and this way wants to speak to me about it. And it's just showing that I told you I was going to phone you, and I did at this time, and I'm going to phone you again next Tuesday at 4:00. And then it's that whole buying trust where you follow up on what you're meant to do. So I guess in terms of the phone, not to ramble too much there, the relating it to fitness, reps and time under tension and doing it over and over has given me much more confidence in that. But equally, where you've spoken about a format and a kind of an opening line that you regularly have, that works the same way, because if you do that 10, 15 times, you'll be comfortable.
You will, absolutely right. I couldn't agree more with what you just said there, because, where does fear come from? Most of it's made up. It comes from a lack of evidence in most cases, but it also comes from a lack of confidence, and confidence only comes from being good at stuff, and being good at stuff only comes from habit, and habit only comes from practicing and repeating and practicing and repeating, shifting from the conscious to the subconscious, if you think about thoughts. So what you've described there is a perfect way. I love as well the fact that the trainer that you work with used sort of power blocks. If you do your preparation work before you pick the phone up, you turn everything else off, and all you do is then spend the next 45 minutes dialing down that list. Perfect. Get yourself in the right state of mind. If you become evangelical about your products because your product helps people solve problems, then why wouldn't you want to ring out and try and speak to people and tell them how great, the world could be if we could have a conversation? Yes, you do need the pattern interrupt. Yes, you could do the Benjamin Dennehy thing, but really, as much and as important as that first 10 seconds to buy yourself the time is what comes next.
Yeah.
And what you've sort of touched on there is that sort of combination of using the phone and email, maybe even text as well. Again, that guy, Mark Akers, taught me once that a great way of sort of reaching out on a phone call is to say, look, hi, I saw your post on LinkedIn. This is another reason, Colin, why branding is so important, and using, the free real estate that you've got on places like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram to sort of build your social house on. Is saw a great post on LinkedIn, Colin. Got a couple of ideas that sparked off in my head that I think might be useful. I've just sent them to you on email. Oh, by the way, it's Matt. Put the phone down. That sounds like I don't care about you. I'm not interested in whether you call me back or anything. I'm just here to give you some valuable information that I think might help. And I think when you receive that voicemail, you're curious. You go to the email, and as long as what's in that email is of value and there's some more curiosity in there, guess what happens? You probably start a conversation.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And within that, you've mentioned around social media and that free real estate, like you said, to share our ideas, give our value, and ultimately build a credibility. And I very much on LinkedIn want to be seen as a thought leader for risk and insurance within the corporate space. And I've got the collateral. My organization produces so much stuff. I just need to filter it down, put it out there with my own spin on it. From the practice I've had through growing an Instagram in the fitness space, I know ask questions at the end, engage in others' posts, all this kind of good stuff that helps drive your engagement and your reach. But ultimately making sure that you're actually using that, because like you say, it's completely free. We're all on LinkedIn anyway. Don't get me wrong. People are checking their LinkedIn regularly anyway. You might as well post something on there. And again, Chris Reeve, when he spoke on the podcast, he was saying it's not just a holiday postcard that you're posting. You actually want people to come back and forth with you. So post something that's going to get conversation going.
100% agreed. And some other little things that probably we're all a little bit guilty of is go and check your messages, your message box on LinkedIn. Go and have a look at the people who actually reached out to you and had a conversation with. There's a reason why they've done that. Sometimes the reason why they've done that is they could well be of interest to you. You could be of interest to them. And some of the mistakes that we sometimes make is we fail to follow up on people that have commented on our post. That's not to sell them. That's just to have an engaging conversation. That's interesting that you like that. Why? Do you mind telling me why? Now, you might not get any response to that. But very few people in my experience sell on LinkedIn. What's LinkedIn there for you? Grow my brand, create that real estate, start conversations, and then take those conversations offline. Get them off LinkedIn, onto a phone call, onto a Zoom call, who knows, even face-to-face. That's really what LinkedIn's all about.
Yeah, it's about connecting, isn't it? And I really like that point. One of the things that struck me in the content I've consumed from you so far is around asking good questions. And we've spoken about that kind of throughout this podcast within different realms and different situations. You have a model, the Bright model, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And I've got it on my notepad through next door beside my work laptop, because I was taking down some notes for my own practice. And I think it'd be great to share that with the listeners a little around the format that you use for those questions.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Let me sort of preempt that with why the word bright. The word bright is because it's the opposite of dull. And dull questions, and I'm guilty of asking loads and loads of dull questions in previous previous roles and previous lives before I really understood what selling was all about. A dull question, Colin, would be something along the lines of, how long have you worked here? How many people work in your organization? Yeah. What keeps you awake at night? That classic, right?
What's your
And the
turnover?
reason, yeah, what's your turnover? The reason why they're dull is because the answer that we get doesn't help us move forward. Questions are like, if you can imagine a golf club, golf bag. You got 14 clubs in there for a reason. What is a golf club used for, Colin? What's its purpose?
Get you closer to going in the hole.
Yeah, so it's going to move the ball a certain distance and a certain trajectory, right? And each club has got its specific use. You would never take a sand wedge off the tee on a par 5. You would never putt with your driver. The reason why? Because those clubs are there for a specific reason. And questions really are like a set of golf clubs. Each question that you have is going to move the conversation forward a certain distance. And what dull questions don't do is that they don't move the conversation forward. For me to find out how many people work in your organization is pointless. I would have to ask another question to try and make that work for me. And I've wasted a question. So bright are the opposite. And bright is an acronym that stands for B is basic. So the very first questions that you would want to ask are those basic questions. And sadly, whether you like it or not, and the acronym BANT that's been around since 1954, first introduced, I think, by IBM, is still relevant, even if people don't like BANT. The component pieces make a lot of sense. I do want to understand about budget. I'm not a charity. I do need to know who's got the authority overall to buy, and how can I help you help me find them so that we can get that guy to sign off or girl to sign off. The N in BANT is need, and T is timeline. So those are really important component pieces, and they make up the B part, which is the basic questions. So you've got to get those basic questions out of the way. The R is realize. I've got to find a way of making you realize that A, you've got a problem, and B, you can't solve it yourself. The I is impact. And an impact question ultimately is working on the sort of the negative side of the brain, which could probably be something along the lines of, look, do you really need help from me, Colin? I mean, what's the impact of doing nothing? And we would work together to work out what the impact would be. And you'd probably say, Matt, I can't, we've got to change it. We're losing business, or it's costing us time. So the I stands for impact, and impact questions are incredibly powerful because they incite and elicit away motivation. And away motivation is incredibly powerful at getting people to move. What away motivation doesn't do, though, is keep people moving forward. And therefore, the next letter is G, and G stands for growth. And so growth questions would be, look, let's pretend we can solve the problem together. It looks like we could. What's got to happen in the future? What impact, what will change? Show me what the results would be. What are the KPIs that say actually doing this, it makes a lot of sense? Show me how you're going to grow. What are you going to do with that extra money? So growth questions are super important, because now I'm taking someone to the promised land. And back to that point we said at the top of the podcast, Colin, which is the importance of selling outcomes. And the H is the most important one for me. It's the one that very few salespeople talk about, which is hijack.
Okay.
Again, I would want to find out right now, look, this looks good. We're on to something here, but just out of curiosity, what might hijack this deal? Who are the blockers in your business? How do we solve that? What are some of the things that might stop this show from going to the end? Yeah.
It was one of my favorite ones when I heard you say that, because it's such a brave question to ask, like you say, but equally you're preempting objections further down the line rather than them coming to you at the end after you deliver it. Like you say, I loved it, but Fred didn't. If you ask, is there anything that would derail how this process is going? Actually, Fred is married to our current provider. Right.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. That's good information to know. Would you agree? Yeah. So H is high. And again, the hijack questions are what separates standard salespeople from the elite. The elite will have no problem at this, because don't forget, we're a part of the sales process. We're 65 to 75% of the way along the journey. Most salespeople by now are trying to pitch and send a quotation. What we're doing is we're tapping the brakes and saying, let's slow down. What could hijack this deal? What would stop you from turning this into reality? And then, of course, the T, the final one, is transition. Okay, we've ticked all those boxes. What's next? What are we going to do from now on? Let's summarize and agree the steps that we're going to take. How do we transition from where we are right now and get this thing over the line? Yeah. And it's a really nice acronym to remember.
Yeah, I like it. And I've written it out, and hijack was the one for me that stood out in terms of making sure that I was addressing potentially something that was sitting in the background that I wasn't aware of. because there's absolutely been cases before where there has been something going on in the background, and because I haven't asked about it, I haven't known about it until it's got to the final stage. And then you're on your hands and knees, you're in a position of deference, and you're trying to overcome objections. You're trying to get back up to be on a level footing with the prospect, and that's not a place that you want to be. You want to sell, like we said, from equality.
As you say, it's very difficult for them to come with an objection if you preempted it with a hijack question.
Yeah, I really like that. And one of the other areas and last areas that we'll touch on was with respect to environment and culture, Matt. I wonder if you have anything around that in terms of the organizations that you go into. How do you help to develop a really strong culture and environment around salespeople to deliver?
I think that organizations should kind of have a sort of a sales charter.
Okay.
I really feel strongly about the fact that, you can go into organizations, Colin, and there's clear evidence that they have a set of values. They might even be on the walls and, all around the environment. Some of them actually live them, breathe them. Occasionally, some people just do them for fun, but there's evidence there that suggests that the organization is trying to work and improve their culture. I think a sales team should be exactly the same. I think there are a number of non-negotiables. In fact, I had a session with a group yesterday I was working with, and the very first thing I said to them, this is session 1, kicking off with these guys on a 10-session program. Let's just pretend, guys, for a minute you've been promoted to the sales director and you're now in charge of this sales team. Go and take 5 minutes and come back in the room with your 3 non-negotiables that must happen in your new sales team because you're the boss. What are they? And they came back in and there were some really quite predictable things, but some really useful things and some really excellent ideas. But the point was, everybody can come up with some non-negotiables, right? The things that must happen: punctuality, be courteous, be civil, be honest. And I think that a really strong sales culture comes from having a set of principles and a charter. I think the other thing that's important as well is healthy competition.
Yeah.
Maybe gamification can work. But healthy competition in the right environment, I think, is really important, as long as the culture allows it to happen and it's not a kind of a one-upmanship thing. I work with a client who's in the recruitment industry, and every time they close a deal, they ring the bell on the floor and everyone stops and applauds. And that's not fake applause. That's genuine applause, because I've worked with these guys a long time. They socialize together. Some of them go on holidays together. And that they celebrate as a group of people company success, because ultimately they know that one deal is keeping them in a job.
Yeah, I really like that.
I think those 2 component pieces sort of go quite a long way to sort of fostering a strong culture. And I think the third thing is really, on a personal level, is to be proud of what you do for a living, and always learn and improve, because sales kind of hasn't really changed much. Although despite the fact there's quite a lot of evidence on LinkedIn that would suggest that it has, I actually don't think it has. I still think it's about finding someone with a problem, helping them solve it, and doing that in a courteous and civil way where you get them what they want on your terms. But of course, around the edges, things have changed. Buyers have a lot more access to information. But it's being abreast of what those changes are and subtly improving and changing and just continuously learning, really. So those 3 things.
I really like those. And when you talk about healthy competition, I can completely resonate with that, because I've seen before, I've always loved the league tables, because you want to be top of the league table. You want to be the leading person. But equally, there was times when in a previous role I was regularly finishing around the top of the league table, and it was tasked upon me by my manager to share best practice and be outgoing with like the different emails I was sending, the little wins that I was having. So celebrating the little wins within this league table as well, because ultimately it might be that you might have finished 3rd out of 10 people and you're feeling okay about it. But the little wins that you had within that cycle end up meaning that you finish first in the next cycle, because you've maybe learned from what the first person was doing, or you've built a pipeline for further down the line. And there's lots of little things that add up to a good sales performance. So for example, we know that potentially at the moment, some deals might have fallen off and the reason cited might be COVID. Now that's absolutely fine. However, as long as you put the foundations in place to be very, very rock solid and have overcome all the other objections that might come, you end up picking up that deal in 2021 when, touch wood, hopefully this finishes. And the last thing to say around the kind of friendly competition is the term that we have now, and I'm a big fan of, is we want you to be the most selfish team player. So we want you to be the striker, in that you're part of the team and you celebrate when everyone else gets a goal, but you want to be the top scorer. And it a lot of football fans in my team, as you can probably imagine. So that helps us to understand that.
I was going to add one little thing as well, Colin. I love what you said there. It's really, I think it's a really positive thing to have healthy competition. Of course, the culture of the business needs to support it, so it needs to embrace it and allow it to happen. Provide a safe environment where it's okay to fail, but to recognise that and to give that person support. So what must happen is continuous coaching, and I very rarely see sales managers doing coaching, which is if we could solve that one issue as an industry, we'd be in such a better place. But sales managers, for a variety of reasons that we don't need to go into right now, don't do enough coaching. But I always say to teams that I work with, buddy up. There are two great reasons why I would want you to buddy up. Pick someone who's probably better than you think, that you could go and learn from, or pick someone you think's not quite as good as you that could go and help. Buddy up. What could you do with buddying up? You could role play for 5 minutes every morning, right? 5 minutes before the clock starts at 9 o'clock, sit down, role play one objection. Back to your point about repetitions under the bar, yeah? And teaching yourself habit. You do that for 30 days. Trust me, you can handle any objection anyone throws at you. That would be my first piece of advice. And then the second thing about buddying up is, if you've got a deal that's going slightly cold, or you've come off the phone from someone you thought, I think they're there, you get your buddy to ring them up. It's sometimes called a touch. And you get them to make that conversation. Colin, it's Matt here calling from Sales Cadence. You've been speaking to my colleague, Chris. He felt like the call didn't go quite as well. He feels like he might have let you down with some of the information he gave you, or he didn't give you enough answers. I overheard, I hope you don't mind, he doesn't know, I just thought I'd give you a call, find out how things are. It's a very risky strategy. Yeah. If you do it right, it can really, really help. And sometimes, I've had deals go over the line because someone has rung up on my behalf to get it over for me. And if you can create a culture where you've got buddies, where you're doing role play together and you're supporting each other to help each other get deals done, you've cracked it.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal insight in terms of how you can create a culture where you all want each other to win, and you might even help each other to win in terms of getting involved like that. So, promise, last question, Matt. Where is the best place for people to find you? And we can talk a little bit around your two books, because I've got Converted on the way from Amazon. But equally, I know you've got your first book, which might be more relevant depending on which industry people are in.
So first book is called Sales Glue. You can get them both on Amazon. Sales Glue came out in 2017, Colin. And if I could summarize Sales Glue, it's a self-help book for salespeople. So 60% of that content is performance psychology based. So if you want to learn about how the brain works, how to focus, if you want to learn about goal setting, responsibility, accountability, you'll find quite a lot of that subject matter in there, delivered in a sales narrative. The book that you've got on order from Amazon, thank you for that, sir. That's great that you're buying that. Converted is a book which describes the 10 steps of the sales process. And it follows in sequence. And I would really heavily encourage anybody who thinks that actually having a process might make sense, or doesn't have one and wants to know what it is, for the sake of £12, buy that book. Not for me, buy it for you, because I genuinely believe it can help everybody convert more leads. So definitely check those two books out. And if anybody's interested in getting in touch, I would say this. On my website, which is salescadence.co.uk, on the products page, right at the top there is a scorecard. And what you can do is you can go onto that scorecard, and there are the 10 steps of the sale that's in the book Converted. You'll find those on an online scorecard. So you can go and score yourself to find out where your hotspots are in terms of areas that you could improve. So you can self-diagnose. And then if you buy the book, it'll give you the answers of how you do it. How about that?
Yeah, that's spot on, Matt. I'll make sure that's linked in the show notes below. Absolutely loved having you on. And I think we've covered the topic that potentially everyone in some way is selling, some of us in more overt ways than others. And hopefully there's been a lot of ways that you can improve in the way that you sell, either to customers, to businesses, or even to your friends and family. If you're with us at this point, please take a screenshot, pop it in your Instagram story, tag myself, send your feedback to Matt as he's outlined in the different areas, and get involved in that scorecard. And I'll speak to you all again next week.